Hey, what you reading for?
Michael, why do you write such dark, disturbing books? Who would want to read that kind of unpleasantness? And why are you so attracted to the darkness anyway? Is that healthy? Maybe you should get help. Now, if you are a horror creator or you enjoy reading horror, you have probably encountered these kinds of questions before. I know I have. And I do not have an answer at the ready. Writing horror is how I make my living. I have rent to pay. I have a cat to feed. What's wrong with horror? Do you not want my cat to be fed? So people who look at me disapprovingly because I write horror, I have to ask them, why do you hate cats? But I am curious. Why am I attracted to the dark and the gruesome? What needs does horror satisfy? Are there benefits to reading horror? So I've been looking into the matter. I've asked these questions to the other horror writers who come on this channel and share with me. I've read articles. So in this video, I want to share with you what I have found. We'll take a look at a few theories. I'll give you my comments on these theories, and then I'll share a few theories of my own. And should parents be concerned if their son or daughter is reading horror? My answer may surprise you. Give this video a like, consider subscribing to the channel, help me feed my cat, check out my books, descriptions and links in the show notes. Now let's get into it. A study conducted by researchers over at the Recreational Fear Lab in Denmark. That sounds like a fun place to work, doesn't it? Where do you work? I work at the Recreational Fear Lab. Oh, cool. I work down at the Leisure Trauma Center. We should hang out. Researchers published a paper back in 2021. A paper, I'll leave links to the sources in the show notes. Researchers suggest that their study demonstrates that people who regularly consume books or movies of horror fared better mentally and demonstrated more resilience when faced with the COVID-19 pandemic. They postulate that horror media serves as a low-risk disaster simulation, a sort of psychological training ground, if you will, specifically in the practice of emotion regulation. Now, I personally did not demonstrate anything resembling a resilience in the face of the COVID pandemic, nor did I express any high level of skill in regards to emotion regulation. No, I freaked out and immediately too. I was living in Budapest. I had very little money and the lockdown put an abrupt halt on my meager income. And I was worried that there would be a run on grocery stores. I was imagining a kind of Mad Max meets World War Z zombie apocalypse scenario. The very scenario I'd been daydreaming, fantasizing about nearly my whole adult life. However, there's a big difference between the hypothetical and the actual, and I was not prepared mentally or emotionally for the lockdown and the pandemic. But I can buy the disaster simulation theory. I can see the benefit in that. I think friend of the channel, Angela Sylvain, said it best.
I think horror writers are brave. We are writing about things not everyone is willing to confront, right? And so we're willing to take our fears and actually talk about them and put them on the page and give other people the tools to maybe work through some of their fears as well. So I think it's kind of a brave way to write. It's not safe. And I think we should be proud of that. Additionally, for the reader, there's a lot of research out there that says that reading and watching horror can actually help you deal with real life trauma. So it's like you're able to, in a safe situation, fight monsters, right?
Okay.
both metaphorically and literally.
Hmm.
You're getting that adrenaline rush, you're getting the watching the battle occur, whether we win or lose. And you're internalizing that. It's almost like you're in training. You're training your body and your mind to deal with scary things. And I think for those of us that read and watch horror, you carry that into your day-to-day life. Now, when I have something real that happens to me that's scary, maybe I'm a little better equipped to handle it than the person who only exposes themselves to wonderful, perfect worlds, right?
Right.
So I guess that's my thought on it.
Okay, that's a great answer. Thank you. From The Guardian, we work so hard to make our world, our environment safer, and then we actively seek out things that will make us afraid. Why? Because this way we can control it. How do we battle the fear of losing the people we love and being powerless to stop it? How do we face that down? Simple. We seek out stories that give us a place where we can put our fears. Books in particular allow us to pour our fears into them before we have so much of it swimming around in our head that we drown in it. I like that answer. If I don't write horror, what am I supposed to do with all the fears swimming around in my head? I have to let them out before I drown in them. As a reader, when I get sucked into a great work of horror, I empathize with the character. I fear for them. There are no stakes, but it's good practice. It puts my own fears in better perspective and allows me to ignore my own fears for a spell, which is nice.
So I think horror writers, especially, you have to be empathetic because you have to be able to know not just why and how the main character is going to respond to these situations, but how and why the villain or the monster is going to act in those situations. Like what has made the monster a monster? And in a lot of ways, I think that horror, and especially with what you have nowadays with the rise in grief horror, is we have a way to channel those feelings and those talking points that before we were told, no, put that away. That's not for polite
Right.
conversation.
Right.
So now we have this chance to actually come out and say, I have been hurt by this. I can channel this into this work. I can give this monster an actual name. I can anthropomorphize this monster, and then I can go in and fight this demon on its level.
I need to feel something. My ex was always saying that I have a heart of stone and I'm incapable of feeling emotion. So I'm constantly looking for things to prove her wrong. And literary fiction, romance, when done well, they make me feel. But horror does that too. Horror makes me feel. And horror proves that I am capable of feeling emotion. And anything that proves my ex wrong is naturally a good thing. Horror is good.
I think you have to try and write truthfully and you have to try and write honestly. And if you're writing about the worst kinds of human behavior and so forth and the worst experiences, you have to kind of go, I find, quite deep into the subject to convey it as realistically as you can. That's where impact can come from. That's where a story can really come alive.
When I was young, I gravitated to horror and heavy metal. Both, I think, because they upset and frightened my parents. Rebellion at that time felt right to me, and anything that fueled the rebellion was good. Especially in terms of aesthetics and taste, I wanted to distance myself from my parents as much as I could. And horror gave me that opportunity. To a large extent, my horror fandom was a big part of my identity. And that was great because my parents hated it. My parents wanted to raise me one way, and I know I had to resist. When I was growing up, there was a subversive, rebellious element to horror, an irreverence. It's challenged conventions and norms. I think since then, horror has gone mainstream, and to a large extent, those elements are not always present in contemporary horror. Horror has gotten nice in a way, which I'm sure there are benefits to that too. I am surprised decades later that I am still an avid horror reader. I thought I would outgrow it once my thirst for rebellion had been quelled, but no, I'm reading more horror today than I ever have, thanks in large part to the growth of this channel. Should parents be concerned if their son or daughter is reading horror? Well, on the one hand, the fact that they're reading fiction is great. Reading fiction allows us, demands us actually, to experience things, to experience fears and emotions from someone else's perspective. Empathy is like a muscle. It needs to be exercised. It needs to be developed, to be strengthened. And reading fiction does just that. I don't have kids, but if I did and I found that they were reading horror that I was not familiar with, I would be curious and I would want to see what it is that they were reading. I have come across horror in the past that I did find problematic, and I'm not talking about the excessive use of present participle clauses. Oof, that is problematic, yes, but I've come across horror that expressed a certain glee coming from the narrator, coming from the writer, actually. A glee, a joy, a glee in inflicting pain on others. And I don't think that's healthy. That has me concerned. This celebration of violence, this giddy pleasure in inflicting cruelties on children and the debasement of women, I wouldn't want my children reading anything like that. But honestly, in all the horror I've read, it's really just the one author that I came across that I felt this way about. And what are your thoughts on the matter? Why horror? Is it a good thing? Should I be concerned that I feel such a strong need to write about it? There are so many dead children in my catalog. That doesn't seem right. At first I thought it was just a coincidence, but looking back, I feel that we may be reaching an unhealthy level of dead children. Possibly. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. I look forward to reading your thoughts on the subject in the comment section. I will leave the last word with friend of the channel, horror writer Nick Cutter. Thank you for watching. I'll see you at the next video.
It's a very hard thing to say, right? Like, I don't know what you tell your mom. I don't know what I tell my parents either, or anyone who asks that question.
I don't have a kid.
Yeah. Why do the birds fly? Why does the sun shine? It happens as it happens. And if I change it, or if you changed it, I think it wouldn't be as truthful.
Right.
And I think readers could tell that too.